the proposal by Mark Carney, Canada's Prime Minister, to revive the Keystone XL pipeline sounds like a bit of an odd idea, apparently, says Mulcair. Let's have a look.
Let's bring in CTV News political commentator and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair. Tom, so we hear more talk about pipelines, clearly, too, as Mark Carney, at least in the last little bit, tabling this idea earlier this week of reviving Keystone XL. What do you make of this conversation, too? He's talked about wanting to make Canada an energy superpower, but just as you heard from the Conservatives House leader, it's not going to dictate or move away from, again, selling our energy to the United States.
Yeah, trying to resuscitate the Keystone XL pipeline sounds like a bit of an odd idea, frankly. You know, the Americans have had it on the table for a long time, and it's basically there that it got blocked. Trump was there for 4 years previously. Keystone XL was on the table before he came in, and it was still on the table when he left, and nothing had happened with it. Eventually, the proponents said, well, it's just not going through. Now, for Carney to be saying that it could go through, what does that actually mean? As I think that Andrew Scheer, is simply saying the truth when he says, look, if you're not allowed to take more oil out of the ground, what's going to go into that pipeline? And that's the other question. Matt, Canada has a history of exporting our natural resources raw. All of the value-added jobs go somewhere else. If we're going to do this again, we're going to be sending lots of raw bitumen to the Gulf Coast of Texas to be shipped wherever else in the world. But all of the jobs around that are going to be American jobs. We haven't done much except extract and export. At the same time, Danielle Smith is saying, no, she actually wants a second pipeline to the Pacific coast, a little bit further up the BC coast than the one. BC government ferociously opposed to that. And where are the Conservatives in all this? They're at the same time asking Carney to remove the tanker ban that stops those tankers that would have to be brought in from that upper pipeline. And there's no answer to that either. So I think that they're just flailing. They'd gone to Washington saying they were going to talk about steel, aluminum, and all of a sudden energy was on the table. And frankly, if it's Keystone XL, it should be a non-starter for Canada, especially for someone like Mark Carney, who knows full well that Canada has obligations under the Paris Accord, and we've got to start doing something to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and respect the idea that we have to think about future generations whenever we take a decision in the country.
So Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has been very clear, crystal clear on her stance with what's going on with the energy sector in Alberta. If the communist NDP leader in BC, David Eby, if he does not allow a pipeline to go to the Pacific coast, which he won't. So right now what's going on, let me break it down, is the battle of, just to simplify it, of who gets to keep their job. British Columbia's premier is severely against pipelines, very much. Hard no. And the people of British Columbia apparently have voted for this guy. They don't want it because it's not environmentally friendly, climate change, blah, blah, blah. Yet most people, like over 80-90% of people in BC, drive gasoline vehicles, but they're against oil and gas and pipelines. No, you can't do that. So they want to bite the hand that feeds them. Alberta is very pro-pipeline, obviously, pro-oil and gas. So in order for, because elections are, going to be coming around the corner for these premiers at some point, in order for them to be reelected, they have to get what they want. Alberta, pipeline. BC, no pipeline. Alberta trying to get a pipeline through BC. He says no. So he's trying to save his job. She's trying to save her job, but also make more money for her province, which would in turn make more money for BC. But they're idiots. They're idiots. They don't know what the hell they're doing. So a real thing that has happened is Alberta has said, Danielle Smith has said, if he's not working with us, we're just going to do a pipeline to America. And that's going to be our new pipeline, which is going to piss off not only BC and communist David Eby, but it's going to piss off the rest of Canada because that money is going to be going to America and it'll probably be paid by American companies. So again, like either you're Canada first or you're not. So either get the pipeline approved to the Pacific coast or you're going to make the biggest screw up in almost Canadian history of having our pipeline go to America and be funded probably by America and American companies. So right now it's kind of interesting to see this tug of war because it's literally, it looks so bad on David Eby. And I hope that there's a massive marketing campaign and videos like this that can get pushed out further so that people in BC can be aware of just how what's the word, politically correct, retarded David Eby truly is to be blocking pipelines. It's actually insane. Canada's environmental status quo is insanely high. We have like the highest standards for extracting oil and gas and building pipelines out of any other country in the entire world. Probably. It's insane. Like, all these companies have adapted to the carbon capture and all this stuff. Like, Canada is very clean with how we do things, which is why it takes forever to get anything done, because our standards are so high that it's just hard to like keep doing things. It's interesting to see this all unfold and to see who is a real Canadian, like who actually wants stuff done for Canada and who's against Canada. And David Eby is against Canada, the NDP. Go figure, right? Go figure.
Government.
Yeah, well, let's expand upon that if we can, and some of the fallout, right? It was maybe going to be steel, it was maybe going to be aluminum, talk about the sectoral tariffs, and this really does seem to be the only development that has been made public about that meeting between Mark Carney and Donald Trump. Is that, Pierre Poilievre was quick to jump on it in question period yesterday.
Yeah, well, with
clearly,
good reason. Yeah.
Right, yeah, and so what do we make?
Makes life easier for an opposition leader to be able to take shots at that, that's for sure.
So what do we make of the follow, Tom? Is that is still, I'm not saying that it's done yet at this point, but, without any news or without any significant developments, not even necessarily a win for the Prime Minister in this, it still is tough.
But everything in politics is instantaneous, especially since the advent of social media. So Mark Carney is someone with deep experience at the highest level internationally. He knows how the game is played. He went into that meeting with a very clear mandate. He said, I will leave that meeting if it's a bad deal. He's always repeated that no deal is better than a bad deal. And he seems to have stuck with that because Trump was trying to sell it as being, the Canadians are going to be so darn happy with what I have to propose. They had their meeting in the White House. Then they had a private meeting. And then Dominic LeBlanc said, no deal, we're going to continue talking. That's the good news. Yesterday, Mark Carney was saying that we're going to get a better deal. Now, that is interesting because that's called raising expectations. And in politics, that's the last thing you want to do unless you can deliver. So my sense of it is that Carney knows that there is something in the works because the Americans need a deal as much as we do. American consumers are hurting. The price of a car or a pickup truck is going to increase greatly. Cost of building a house in the U.S. is going to increase greatly with the 45% tariff on softwood lumber because most of the lumber sold in the States comes from Canada. Mm-hmm. And yet that wasn't one of the main things on the table. So nor was automobile. So we have to try to get to a place where we're preparing the next Canada-U.S.-Mexico deal. That has to be renegotiated just around the corner. It has to be renegotiated next year. So they came away from this meeting with nothing except more promise. And I do think, though, that Carney is playing his cards close to his vest, and he's got something in the works with Trump, and especially with Letnick, who is the slightly smarter version of Trump, but somebody who is equally unpredictable.
CTV News political commentator, former
he just can't help himself. It's wild to see the lack of self-awareness from mainstream media and their
NDP leader Tom
and their guests. Sorry about that. And you know what's funny? It's always kind of left-wing progressive guests that go on these talk shows. Never once have I been invited. I've actually emailed CTV saying I'd love to go and talk to you guys. I'd probably make myself look like an idiot. I wouldn't be wearing a suit. But these people don't understand that Canada needs to use our resources. We can't just brag about it. We can't just be that rich kid, the rich kid's son who brags about how Papa has Lamborghinis and Ferraris and Papa has a yacht and we never actually do anything with it. And it's such braggadocious behavior. People eventually realize that, you're just bragging about having it. You're not bragging about using it. We're going to come and get it because we know at some point there's going to be a big shift in the world. Either America is going to say, okay, well, time's up, we're taking it, or China's going to try to do something. But at some point, something like that is inevitable to happen. Look at any map over the last 1,000 years. Things grow and things collapse. Things shift and they move around. It's just inevitable. So if Canada doesn't actually find ways to, use our resources, our minerals, our oil and gas, we're going to lose it. It won't disappear, but it's very likely that somebody could take it. And that's a real threat that is out there that the left just doesn't seem to even think about. Kind of crazy.
Mr. Lutnick's comments, is the auto sector able to survive without a free trade with the U.S.?
Listen, what I can say is that we've been fighting, as you know, for the auto sector, for the workers. It's a great industry in our nation. I see ourselves, when I say that, Canada and the U.S. more as complementary than in real competition, because the fact that we have integrated supply chain, and I would say that goes back for decades, is what really makes our products more innovative, more competitive, and I think that's something which is positive on both sides of the border.
But he's saying the U.S. first now, Canada second. That's Mr. Lutnick's position.
Listen, I heard this comment, but I can say from a Canadian perspective, and I've been spending quite some time with the auto sector, is really when you look at the integrated nature of our production, when you look at the auto parts, when you're looking at aluminium, when you look at the essential things that you need to build the cars of the 21st century, and think about the battery ecosystem, for example, everything you need to make the cars of today and tomorrow is the fact that we're integrated, and I think this is what makes North America very competitive. This is the economic bloc where we have brought innovation, competitiveness, and I think by that kind of approach that we have had for decades is what has made the cars that we make.
Okay, this is Finance Minister Francois Philippe Champagne speaking to.
Yeah, we have access to so much of this stuff here in Canada, and we're just not really using it. It's so freaking bizarre. I don't get it.
Okay, so in those meetings in Washington yesterday, U.S. President Donald Trump and Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, raised the possibility of reviving the Keystone XL pipeline. It would run from northern Alberta to the U.S. Midwest. This, as Alberta has been pitching a different pipeline, one that would run from the province to the northwest coast of British Columbia. BC Premier David Eby says he doesn't support it, but Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, she is not backing down.
Should it really be easier for us to deal with Donald Trump and get Keystone XL restarted and built down to the Gulf Coast? Should that be easier than building a new bitumen pipeline to British Columbia, Port of Prince Rupert, so that we can access Asian markets? Like, does Canada work or doesn't it? That's the turning point that we have right now.
Well, the Premier of British Columbia, David Eby, joins me now. Premier Eby, always good to have you on the show. Thank you for joining.
He looks like a depressed Woody from Toy Story. I just love it. Oh my goodness. This guy just looks and sounds so pathetic. And that is obviously reflected in his policies, in his views. It's so funny.
Today, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me, David.
You just heard Premier Smith criticizing your government for being harder to deal with on a pipeline project than President Trump. She's also referred to you as un-Canadian and calls your actions unconstitutional. Them's fighting words, Premier. How do you respond to that?
Them's fighting words.
Yeah, it's hard to know where to begin, David. I've been trying to maintain a good relationship with Alberta. There's so much that we can do with Alberta, and we've tried to work with them on a number of projects. But what I have right now is a minister from Alberta who is going along to First Nations along the coast of British Columbia and saying that Alberta is going to be building a heavy oil pipeline through to their communities, which they see as an existential risk. There is an oil tanker ban off the coast for good reason. It protects a very fragile coast, but it was also the social license for a significant economic development piece along the north. Major projects, the largest private sector investment in Canadian history in LNG Canada Phase 1. That coalition is currently considering Phase 2. There's Stylism's LNG and Cedar LNG, as well as a massive port expansion in Prince Rupert. All of it depends on the goodwill of these First Nations. And this is all being put at risk by a premier from Alberta who's advancing a project that has no proponent, no route, no private funding, and these are projects in BC that have proponents, private funding, they're through environmental assessment, and they're ready to go. And so to have those projects put at risk by what is frankly a non-existent project from Alberta is wildly frustrating.
Okay, I want to just talk.
So this is almost turning into what came first, right? The chicken or the egg, right? Danielle Smith is saying that she's ready to go ahead with a pipeline to the Pacific coast. And David Eby saying, well, we can't commit to anything that you're ready to move forward with. We need a concrete plan. But the thing is that if the construction starts in Alberta and gets to the border of BC, he will block it because he doesn't want pipelines to go through British Columbia. This has been the tug of war between Alberta and British Columbia for years. It goes back so far because BC is, well, I hate to say it, but voted quite progressively. NDP of all things. Like, it doesn't get more communist than that. And so it's just sad to see. And unfortunately now our pipeline is going to be going to America, funded by American venture capitalists, American companies, and we're going to be paying royalties to them. And it should have been a Canada pipeline, and it won't. It won't be because of this guy right here.
Talk about those phone calls from the Alberta minister that you mentioned there, because I spoke with Marilyn Slett on the show last week, and she said she'd been called, I think, the day before the premier announced that she was going to be, basically the government would be the proponent. They're calling them directly, not saying they want to build a pipeline, they're saying they will build a pipeline. I mean, what is your understanding of what the nature of those conversations are?
Well, I know what I've been told directly, which is that Alberta has a proponent for the project, and that if the pipeline is not built, then the country as a whole is broken. Which tells me that from the perspective of the Premier's office in Alberta, this is an existential issue for them. The only way this pipeline gets built is if there are tens of billions of dollars of taxpayer dollars going into it.
No, it'll be privatized.
There is no private proponent putting it forward. And if there is $40 to $50 billion of federal money to build a pipeline from Alberta to BC's north coast, well, let's have a fair and open bid process among all the provinces and territories to show what we could do with that kind of money. Why is it always Alberta that threatens to leave the country unless they get tens of billions of dollars? On Pipeline 1, $30 billion of federal money went into the Trans Mountain Pipeline project. It's not even at capacity, and there's an optimization project that could significantly increase the amount of product that it moves from Alberta to Tidewater to Asian markets, but there's no interest in talking about that. It is exclusively about this non-existent project that threatens big projects in BC that are going to benefit the whole country, that frankly Canadians from coast to coast to coast work on and help us deliver.